On Royal Street, in the French Quarter of New Orleans, there is a small opening between two buildings. When I say small, I mean it's only large enough for one, maybe two people. And on the stairs that rise from the small opening sits a woman. She dresses like the gypsies dressed in the old-time movies. She wears a long black dress, a hair covering, and she jingles with her bracelets and rings when she waves her hands. Her skin is dark and weathered. She has many wrinkles, and each one seems to tell a story. You know this by looking at her. She is small in stature, just a tiny bit of a woman. But when you walk past the opening, you will know she is there, sitting on the stair with a small table in front of her. Her wrinkled hands placed calmly upon the table, as she is patient. She is patiently waiting for the person who is drawn into her by her peculiar ability to make you feel her presence. The first time I walked past her, I was jolted by her presence. She hadn't moved, but I caught her out of the corner of my eye, looking at me. I turned to look at her, and when we made eye contact, I could feel that the small, shriveled body was wise beyond even her age. She had cold steel eyes, and they returned my gaze, and I couldn't stop looking. I felt the need to walk towards her, and as my muscles prepared to do so, my companion happily and noisily came quickly up to my side and grabbed my hand. "Come here, see this," I was being told, and it broke my gaze, and I left. I still think of that woman from time to time. Her gaze told me that she had a message for me, that if I were to ask her my question, she would tell me the answer, that she was not the carnival type of card reader or psychic. She knew things. She knew what I wanted to ask, and she would tell me, not of fortune or future loves, of happy family or a new job, not to say, stay on the same path. No. She would tell me the things that I wasn't sure that I wanted to hear. She would answer the darkest questions from the deepest places in my heart. A year later, I heard a story about a group of young men out partying, being loud and stumbling around. They too walked past that opening and were startled to see the woman. They jumped and laughed, but one man was drawn to her eyes. The story goes that she slowly raised an arm and pointed to him with one thin, bent, and wrinkled finger and whispered, "Boy, come here." The group stopped to make sure that she was talking to them, but the man knew she was. Her eyes locked into his. "Boy, come see me." Slowly he walked to the stoop, as the others were laughing and taunting him, but he wasn't hearing them. He only knew that he had to talk to this woman. As he was standing before her table, she placed her hand out, palm up, as if asking for his hand, and he gave it to her. And as she held it, he could feel the wrinkles that time and age had engraved into her skin. Her skin was warm, and as she drew on his palm with the same bent finger, she looked into his eyes and whispered, "Boy, hear me now, for there is no other time. Tell your loved ones that they are loved. Kiss those who need to be kissed, and say what needs to be said, for you are the walking dead." He quickly drew his hand back and the other young men were loudly laughing and mocking her. You mean like a zombie? Oh, Joel, the witch says you're a zombie. Joel became red-faced from anger and embarrassment, and as he was walking away, he could still hear her. Say what needs to be said, for you are the walking dead. Later that night, the men walked to the top of an abandoned building 15 stories tall. There are still, even now, much too many of them. And as they drank, the man named Joel brought his legs up from dangling over the roof, and in his haste and drunken state, he began to fall backwards. The others couldn't help him. It all happened so quickly, they had told the papers and the police. There was the man named Joel, spread on the sidewalk, his neck turned backwards so that his eyes were facing up to the sky, his legs askew. 2 years later, the men returned to Royal Street, and just as had happened before, they were startled by the old woman still sitting in her stoop, hands upon her tiny table. She looked at one of the men, and as the group whispered that they had seen her the night that their friend had died, they remembered that she had told him that he was the walking dead. As they walked up to the woman, she pointed to one of the men with her thin, bent finger. Boy, come here. Come see me, boy. The group asked her then, what is the walking dead? She slowly looked down at her cards, and they asked her again. And she answered, the walking dead are those whose time is ticking. They are moments away from their death, yet so unaware. Then she reached out to the man in the group that she had pointed to before, and she began, boy, say what needs to be said. And the man became so frightened that he turned to run away. At the same moment, a carriage was passing by, and when the man jumped out onto the street, the horses became spooked. They reared up, hooves falling directly onto the man's head and killing him. There is an old woman who sits on a small stoop in between 2 buildings on Royal Street in the French Quarter of New Orleans. She knows if you will be passing by.